Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Source. So in this one, I'm doing college football Saturday day games. I think I got 6 I'm going to go through, and then I'm going to upload another video where I'll go through 6 or 7 night games as well. Felt like this is the best way to do it. We're going to try it out. So 6 games. I'm recording this on Thursday, so I do not know how we did on Thursday and Friday yet. Hopefully by the time you're watching, we had a couple of winning nights. But yeah, college football Saturday day games. Let's go.
Welcome to The Source. The Source. Hey, get the Source.
So without further ado, why don't we start with the biggest game of the weekend? Penn State on the road in Columbus. Ohio State laying 4.5 points at home here. Total sitting at 45.5. Public's all over the Nittany Lions in this one. Penn State definitely looking like a public dog. Line did drop down to 4 on Tuesday morning, but it's back up to 4.5. I actually see a couple 5s out there, so might be moving in the other direction. Public seems to still be coming in on Penn State. So Penn State has really struggled against the Buckeyes. They haven't beaten Ohio State since 2016, 6 straight losses. The last time they beat the Buckeyes on the road in Columbus was back in 2011, so 12 years ago. The last 4 years have all been double-digit wins for Ohio State. You got to go back to 2018 to find the last time Penn State even brought it within single digits. So safe to say Ohio State has owned Penn State in recent years. Well, offensively, I'm not really loving what I'm seeing from Penn State. The focal point of the offense is obviously the run game. They were hyping up this Penn State run game all offseason, and it really hasn't been that good. Just 34th in rushing yards per game, 55th in yards per carry. They're ranked 6th in effective rush, though, so analytically, they're still one of the best rushing attacks in the country, but we haven't really seen it yet. And I think they're going to be in a situation here, because not only are they going on the road, but they're going to Columbus, and that Ohio State defense is an absolute problem. I know everyone's talking about Kyle McCord and his struggles. Buckeyes offense isn't what it was in years past, but the Ohio State defense is number 1 in the FBS according to BetaRank, 2nd in effective pass, 7th in effective rush. We just saw Maryland come into Columbus a couple weeks ago and do nothing offensively, and Maryland's got an explosive offense too. Penn State and Maryland are actually ranked pretty close, offensively speaking. Maryland scored just 17 points and had just 302 total yards in that game. They couldn't do anything on Ohio State. 4.8 yards per pass attempt and 3.0 yards per carry. This Ohio State defense is serious work. Now, as far as throwing the ball, Drew Aller is having a pretty decent season statistically. Actually, it's a good season. They haven't really asked him to do much. He's basically been just a game manager for that Penn State offense, but he's doing a good job at it. Completing 65% of his passes, 209 yards per game, 12 touchdowns, no picks, a 145 passer rating. But obviously, this is going to be the toughest defense Aller's seen so far this year, and the fact that it's on the road in Columbus makes it even worse. Look at Drew Aller's home-away splits on the season. He's only played 2 games on the road this year, but in those games, he's completed just 51.5% of his passes, under 200 yards per game, and just 1 touchdown, a 107 passer rating. I mean, that's bad. Now, we know Penn State's got 2 talented running backs. I'm sure they're going to move the chains here and there, but overall, I don't like the matchup for this offense. I think they're going to struggle, and I think Drew Aller is going to be forced to make throws he doesn't want to make. Keep in mind, this Buckeyes pass defense is absolutely nuts. But Penn State isn't the only offense that should have problems moving the ball in this game, because Ohio State's got their own problems on that side of the ball. Buckeyes' run game has really struggled to start the season. Just 76th in rushing yards per game, 58th in yards per carry, and 67th in effective rush. To be fair to the Buckeyes' run game, though, they've been dealing with serious injuries. Trevion Henderson hasn't played in a month. That's their star running back. He's listed as a game-time decision last week against Purdue, so I assume he's going to play in this one, but I actually thought he was going to play last week. And this is huge because this guy has eaten on Penn State. He's played 2 games in his career against Penn State, and he's averaging 115 yards in those games on 5.23 yards per carry. He scored 3 touchdowns in those games as well. I'm assuming because he was a game-time decision last week, that means he'll probably play this week, but who knows with these college football injury reports. And it's especially important to have him on the field in this one because Ohio State's backup running back, I forget his name, but he got hurt in the first quarter of the Purdue game last week. I don't think he's going to play. So if Henderson isn't playing in this one, Ohio State's going to have their 3rd-string running back taking the carries. Now, it's Ohio State. I'm sure their 3rd-string running back's like a 4-star recruit. He's probably still awesome, but they definitely need Trevion Henderson on the field for this game. Now, as far as throwing the ball, I know that Kyle McCord hasn't been perfect. He's definitely had his struggles. For the first 3 quarters of that Notre Dame game, he was straight bad, but I feel this kid's gotten a lot of unfair criticism. I mean, he's got much better looking numbers than Drew Aller does. He's averaging over 275 yards per game, 11 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's got a 165.9 passer rating, much higher than Drew Aller. Look how good Kyle McCord's been in his home games at Columbus, completing over 72% of his passes compared to 58% completions on the road, almost 300 yards per game, 8 touchdowns, no picks, a 213 passer rating. He's been essentially perfect at home in Columbus. Now, to be fair, Ohio State hasn't had the toughest competition in their 3 home games, but still, he's been flawless. He's definitely going to have his hands full in this one, though, because Penn State's defense against the pass is about as legitimate as it gets in the FBS. First in pass yards per game allowed, first in yards per pass attempt allowed, and first in completion percentage allowed. But I do have to ask, against who? I mean, Penn State hasn't seen a single decent passing attack this entire season. Analytically, the highest rated pass game on Penn State's schedule so far this year was West Virginia. West Virginia can't even throw the ball. That's a rushing team. So both sides are in for a huge wake-up call in this game. Look, I don't know how much betting value is on this game. I mean, obviously it should be fun as hell to watch. But personally, I think Penn State's going to choke. I could see Drew Aller throwing a couple picks here. So I'm going to lay him. I'm on the Buckeyes here. Give me Ohio State minus 4.5. I might also bet the under at 45.5 next game. Air Force at Navy. We got a Service Academy game here. Navy catching 10.5 points at home in Annapolis. Total sitting at 34.5. Public looks to be coming in on Navy in this one, and I'm surprised by that because Air Forces look really good. Could be because the quarterback's out. Tickets are on Navy. Handles coming in on Navy. Line hasn't moved. Still looking at midshipman plus 10.5. So Air Force has controlled this rivalry in recent years. They've taken 4 of their last 5 matchups against Navy. Air Force also won convincingly the last time they took a trip out to Annapolis back in 2021. Final score of that game was 23-3. Important to mention that Air Force quarterback is most likely out for this game. Now, I know Air Force never throws the ball, but he does a lot of work out of that option. He runs the ball a lot. So I don't know anything about the Air Force backup quarterback. Just thought I should mention that. I think the quarterback is out. So obviously it's a Service Academy game, so we know we're not going to see many pass attempts in this one. In fact, Air Force and Navy are number 1 and 2 in the FBS in rushing frequency. These two teams run the ball more often than any other team in the FBS. Now on the season, it's no secret that Air Force has been obviously way better than Navy. Air Force leads the FBS, averaging over 326 rush yards per game on 5.4 yards per carry. Air Force is rated first in the country in effective rush. This Air Force offense is not easy to stop. Again, they're missing their quarterback, though. And on the defensive side of the ball, no question, Air Force has been way better. Air Force is top 10 in both rush yards per game allowed and rush yards per carry allowed. Navy's 86th and 85th in those two categories. To be fair, though, Navy's played a much tougher schedule, which is why if you look at their ratings at effective rush, they're a lot closer. It's 53rd to 65th. Look, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this game. I mean, this one really comes down to how you personally like to bet. If you're the type of person that goes by the numbers, then Air Force is the play here. They've been way better than Navy, and on paper, they should beat Navy by at least 2 touchdowns. But if you're the type of person that says, screw the numbers, it's Navy at home in Annapolis and a Service Academy rivalry, I'm taking the points, I could see your angle, for real. As far as me personally, I usually am the type of person that goes with the numbers. I think I might end up taking the 10.5 with Navy, though, just because the quarterback's out. And if you've watched Air Force, you know that although they're running the ball all the time, he's a huge part of that offense. I mean, he makes a lot of plays out of that option. So I would imagine missing him is a huge hit to the offense. So I'll take the points. Give me Navy plus 10.5. Obviously not going to be one of my bigger bets, but I'm taking Navy. Let's talk SEC for a second. Mississippi State on the road at Arkansas. Hogs are laying 6.5 points at home here. Total sitting at 48.5. Public's coming in on the Hogs pretty heavy in this one. Line was sitting at 6 all week, and then Thursday morning it moved up to 6.5. I doubt this one hit 7. I imagine this one will probably close at 6.5. So head-to-head, this rivalry's been pretty back and forth. Mississippi State has taken 3 of their last 5 matchups against Arkansas. They did get beat in their last trip to Fayetteville, though. Final score was 31-28 Arkansas. Now, normally, when you're handicapping a Mississippi State game, you don't even have to look at the opponent's run defense because all they're trying to do is throw the ball. But actually, we're seeing the Bulldogs implement some more run packages into the offense this year. They're passing on just 52.37% of their snaps this year. That's 39th most in the FBS. Still a pass-first offense, but if you've been following Mississippi State football the past few years, you know that's way lower than it has been. But there was one game this year where Mississippi State dropped Will Rogers back to pass an insane amount of times. It was on the road against South Carolina in Week 4. Rodgers went 30 of 48 with 487 yards in that one. In the other 5 games, he's averaging just 15 completions on 24.6 attempts, just 157.6 passing yards per game. That was Mississippi State's only road game this year, and it was against an exploitable South Carolina secondary. What do we have this week? We have Mississippi State on the road again, their second road game of the year, against Arkansas, who has an exploitable secondary. So I'm expecting Will Rogers to drop back to pass 45 plus times again in this one, just like he did against South Carolina. The Hogs have been really struggling to stop the pass this year. They're just 122nd in yards per pass attempt allowed, 116th in opponent's passer rating. This is a bad pass defense, no question. Now, they play in the SEC West, so obviously they're going to see a lot of strong passing offenses playing in that division, but still, this secondary is definitely vulnerable. On the other side, we've got KJ Jefferson and the Arkansas offense, and I mean, I've just been disappointed with the way they've played recently. These guys are just trending in the wrong direction. KJ Jefferson has some really underwhelming numbers in his last 3 games, just 177 pass yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks, completing just 58% of his passes, passer rating under 130. Now, we do have to be fair and mention that 2 of those last 3 games were against Alabama and Texas A&M. I mean, we should give him a little bit of a pass for those 2, but he wasn't good against Ole Miss either. He was not good at all against BYU. Arkansas offense just looks broken this year. But I have some good news for the Hogs because they're playing Mississippi State, and that Bulldogs defense is so bad, especially against the pass. This is a perfect opportunity for KJ Jefferson to bounce back with a good game, and I'm sure he will. I mean, he's got a ton of experience. He's been through a lot of ups and downs in his career. I'm sure he'll play a good game in this one. But overall, this one still just feels like a shootout to me. I think this is a prime spot for Mississippi State's offense to bounce back as well. And whenever you're dealing with a shootout, it's always nice to have 6.5 extra points in your pocket. So I'm going to hit Bulldogs, Mississippi State plus 6.5. I'm also going to hit the over at 48.5. Next game. Got an ACC matchup here. Boston College on the road at Georgia Tech. Both these teams coming off a bye. Georgia Tech laying 4.5 points at home. Total sitting all the way up at 58.5. Public's looking pretty split on this one. To be honest, when I first looked at this matchup, I thought Boston College would be a public dog, but it's not what it's looking like. Action's about 50-50, and the line's still sitting at 4.5. So I want to start by pulling up the last few games for Georgia Tech, because this happens all the time in college football, and everyone always complains about it. So you see Georgia Tech goes on the road, beats Wake Forest by 14, then comes home, loses to Bowling Green, then goes on the road and upsets Miami. This is called a flat spot, traveling back home to play a shitty non-conference game right smack in the middle of 2 huge road conference games. And the Miami loss to Georgia Tech, that was a home game right before going on the road to play North Carolina. Identifying these types of spots is huge, not only for betting the games, but also for analyzing, because looking back, you can point to that Bowling Green game and be like, oh, Georgia Tech's defense is terrible, but you got to take it in context. Now, in this particular matchup, these 2 teams are in pretty similar spots. I mean, both are coming off bye weeks, and both in their last games coming off huge last-minute wins, so no real edge in that department here. When you match these 2 teams up on the field, Georgia Tech's got themselves a nice passing attack brewing. They're throwing the ball a lot, 48th in pass frequency. They're 36th in the FBS in yards per pass attempt and 31st in effective pass. Georgia's passing attack very undervalued right now. And look how good Haynes King has been at home this year. He's averaging 317 yards per game, 9.7 yards per attempt. He's getting the ball downfield. He's got a 177 passer rating compared to 226 yards per game, 7.3 yards per attempt, and a 133 passer rating on the road. Want to know how Boston College has been defending the pass this year? Awful. They're allowing 9.3 yards per pass attempt on the season. That's 127th in the FBS. They're rated 125th in effective pass. This is one of the worst pass defenses in the FBS. Haynes King at home, where he's been playing great this year, coming off a bye week. I mean, this should be a great spot for him to make plays downfield on this Boston College secondary. Now, on the other side of the ball, Georgia Tech's been decent defensively, pretty middle-of-the-pack numbers here. 61st overall, 55th in effective rush, 64th in effective pass. Like I said earlier, they did struggle in that Bowling Green game. Definitely got caught off guard in that one. And they got lit up on the road at Ole Miss, but I mean, who doesn't get lit up on the road at Ole Miss? But in their conference games, in their ACC games, defense has been great. They were great against Miami, and they were great against Wake Forest as well. I like this Georgia Tech defense. And they're matched up against this Boston College offense. Now, BC's offense, I don't want to call it one-dimensional because they can run it and throw it, but it really revolves around one player, quarterback Thomas Castellanos. And I was really curious to see how he was going to produce in the Army game. The problem was the weather in that game was so awful that we really didn't get a look at him. I mean, he only dropped back to pass 9 times in the entire game. That weather was a mess. The reason I really wanted to see how he was going to produce in that Army game was because he was coming off his first bad game as a starter. He had that huge game against Florida State. He kind of burst onto the scene, and he followed it up with another good game on the road at Louisville. Then against Virginia, a defense that he should have gone nuts against, he wasn't good. 16 of 26, 183 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, just a 130 passer rating. I had Boston College minus 3.5 in that game. They ended up winning by 3, so I lost by the hook. I was pissed. So I really wanted to see how he bounced back after that game. Basically, we need to find out if teams have figured out how to stop this guy now that they have film on him, or was that just a bad game against Virginia? And obviously, we didn't get to see it in the Army game. Personally, I think it's the former. I don't think this Boston College team is very good. I think Castellanos, with his athleticism, just caught everyone off guard, but he's come back down to earth, and the conference has kind of figured out how to stop him. I think this Georgia Tech team's very undervalued on both sides of the ball right now, so I'm going to lay him. Give me Georgia Tech minus 4.5 next game. Some more SEC. This is the biggest SEC game of the weekend. Tennessee on the road in Tuscaloosa. Alabama laying 8.5 points at home here. Total sitting at 48.5. So this line's been sitting at 8.5 all week. I did see a couple 9.5s out there, but this one's shaping up to be a pros versus public game. Public slightly leaning Alabama, and the sharp action definitely seems to be on the Vols. So matchup history dramatically favors Alabama in this one. Vols did get them last year. Tennessee won last year, but before that, Tide had taken 15 straight games against Tennessee. And the last time Tennessee had beaten Alabama in Tuscaloosa, 20 years ago, back in 2003, which was actually a 5 overtime win. So yeah, Tennessee has not won here in 20 years. This Alabama team this year, it's starting to look a bit undervalued if you ask me. They lost to Texas, and then South Florida played them really tough in the following week, and public kind of wrote Alabama off. But they've now won 5 straight, including a real nice road win at Texas A&M. Last week, I know the final score was 24-21 against Arkansas, so it may appear like that was a close game, but really wasn't. Alabama was up 24-6 late in the third quarter. Arkansas scored a couple late touchdowns to make it look close, but look at the total yards. 415 to 250, 11.3 yards per pass attempt for Alabama to 6.3 for Arkansas, 4.2 yards per carry to 2.8. I mean, Alabama controlled that entire game. That being said, this might be a tough spot for Jalen Milroe. Tennessee's defense is not to be played with. Against the passer, 17th in pass yards a game allowed, 12th in yards per attempt allowed, and 22nd in effective pass. And it's not like the Vols defense hasn't seen any quarterbacks. I mean, they held Graham Mertz to just 166 yards through the air, Spencer Rattler to 169 yards, Max Johnson threw for 223 yards last week. Overall, Vols defense have been rock solid against the pass. Alabama's going to need to get the run game going in this one, and you know what? That's going to be a challenge also, because the Vols defense is a problem in that department as well. Tennessee's 15th in yards per carry allowed, 22nd in yards per game allowed on the ground, 16th in effective rush. The thing with Alabama's offense, though, especially at home, they just find a way to put points up, even if it's an elite defense coming in. Texas has one of the best defenses in the FBS. They came into Tuscaloosa, and obviously they won that game 34-24. But Alabama still scored 24 points, had 362 total yards. So despite Tennessee's defense being official, and it is, Tennessee's defense is legitimate, I think we could still count on Alabama getting the ball in the end zone a few times. Now, when we flip it over to the other side of the ball, Tennessee's passing attack just doesn't exist. I mean, it's an absolute shell of what it was last year with Hendon Hooker. They are 91st in the FBS in passing yards per game, 86 in yards per attempt, and 79th in effective pass. I had Tennessee minus 3 as my top bet last Saturday, and man, Joe Milton just could not make plays through the air. The Vols' only offensive hope in this game comes on the ground, where they've been good. Tennessee's been running the ball efficiently. They're 6th in rushing yards per game, 7th in yards per carry, 4th in effective rush. So the Tennessee run game has been there. In fact, I should personally thank Jalen Wright for my cover last week, because he single-handedly covered that Tennessee minus 3. 19 carries, 136 yards, 7.2 yards per carry. That was against A&M, too. It's not like they were playing Vanderbilt. The question is, can he replicate a performance like that on the road against Alabama? Because nobody's really run the ball on the Tide so far this year. I mean, even the game they lost, Quinn Ewers won that game for Texas, throwing it. Texas averaged just 2.8 yards per carry on the ground in that win. Alabama on the season is 21st in rushing yards per game allowed, 8th in yards per carry allowed. They're ranked 34th in effective rush. And if you look at Alabama's opponents, yes, Tennessee will be the toughest rushing attack they've seen so far this year, but it's not like Alabama's been playing scrubs. I mean, Texas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas. Alabama's seen 3 top 50 rushing attacks, and nobody's run the ball on this defense yet. Bottom line is Alabama's defense against the pass is elite. They're 4th in the FBS in effective pass. Joe Milton just hasn't been good. In fact, he's got one of the lowest QBRs in the entire conference. This line's sitting at 8.5 for a reason. I mean, I think Alabama might roll them. As far as what I'm betting, I'm hovering between 3 right now. I might even split my money into thirds and bet all 3. I'm looking at Alabama minus 8.5, under 48.5, and Tennessee team total under 19.5. My bet will be somewhere in there, maybe 2 of those 3. I'll let you know the final decision on the live show Saturday morning at 10:30 a.m. Next game. Another SEC matchup here. Gamecocks are on the road at Mizzou. Missouri laying 7.5 points, which is up from 7. It was at 7 this whole week. It just recently moved to 7.5. Total sitting at 59.5. So like I said, this line was at 7 all week. Thursday morning, it jumped up to 7.5 because the money's definitely coming in on Missouri. Public's closer to even with the sharp action in on Mizzou. So Mizzou's got a little bit of a winning streak going against South Carolina. They've taken 4 straight against the Gamecocks. Last time South Carolina beat Missouri was back in 2018. That wild LSU game. But let's bring a graphic up of Missouri's opponents. And the reason for that, I'm starting to question this Missouri defense specifically against the pass. They've only played 2 top 40 offenses this season. One was LSU and they lost that game, and the other was Kansas State, and they kicked a 61-yard field goal at the end of regulation to win that one. Missouri's defense on the season is allowing over 27 points per game. That's 66th in the FBS. They're 53rd in yards per game allowed. Beta rank has them 35th overall defensively, but I don't know about that. I've had Missouri in my top bets twice this year, both cashed. And I had LSU minus 5.5 as my top bet, my number 1 bet against Missouri, and I was lucky as hell to cash that. So I've watched a lot of Missouri football this year, and I really don't think that defense is that good, specifically against the pass. Yes, they looked good against Kentucky last week, but what do we know about the Kentucky offense this year? It's completely reliant on the run game with Ray Davis. I mean, Devin Leary's been terrible throwing the ball this year. That's a run-first offense, and yeah, Missouri's defense looked pretty solid against them. Both times Missouri saw a dangerous passing attack, they struggled, and now they play South Carolina. And look, the Gamecocks have had their share of problems this year for sure, and yes, that offense is definitely one-dimensional as hell, but they can definitely throw it. They are 16th in effective pass, 92nd in effective rush. You got this South Carolina team coming off an ugly loss. I mean, they had that game in the bag against Florida and choked it away. South Carolina betting stock is at an all-time low right now. Might be time to buy. I mean, Spencer Rattler could have a big game here. Now, on the other side of the ball, when we look at Mizzou's offense, yes, Brady Cook didn't have the greatest game last week against Kentucky. Nothing like the previous games we've seen from him this year, but Kentucky can play defense. South Carolina really can, so I'm not putting too much weight into that. Even after that bad game, Missouri is still a top 25 passing attack. I mean, maybe even top 15 or top 10. They're 12th in passing yards per game, 8th in yards per attempt, and 17th in effective pass. South Carolina is allowing 337 passing yards per game. That's 132nd in the FBS, 8.7 yards per pass attempt allowed. Statistically, this is one of the worst pass defenses in the FBS. If you're wondering how they're still ranked 56th in effective pass with numbers like that, it's because those metrics are schedule adjusted. Gamecocks have played North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Florida. I mean, 5 teams that all have good quarterbacks, all can throw the ball. But you know what? So does Missouri. So yes, South Carolina's pass defense is severely undervalued, but I don't see them shutting down Missouri's offense, not in the slightest. Over the last 2 years, this has been the spot to fade Missouri. They're just 2-5 against the spread as home favorites since 2022. Well, I think South Carolina's a live dog here. I'm expecting a shootout, so of course I want 7.5 extra points. Give me South Carolina plus 7.5, and I'm also eyeing up the over at 59. For my top bets, parlay of the day, and to join the Discord, head over to KyleKirms.com. If you want to catch the live show, that's Saturday morning at 10:30 a.m. I think I got 19 games we're going to go through. We'll make our final decision, so if you're able to make it, love to see you in the comments.